What if I told you that Ferrari could have buried its chances of becoming champion again with a single strategic move? The new 2026 regulation has unleashed an earthquake in Maranello, and today we are going to tell you why that decision could cost them years of competitiveness. Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now, if we continue. For years, Ferrari has been trapped in a cycle of false hopes, intermittent performance peaks, and unfulfilled promises. The most emblematic Scuderia in Formula One, which once dominated the category with an iron fist, has not lifted the constructor's title for more than a decade. Each change in regulation, each new technical director or internal restructuring has been attributed the role of final rescue. And the arrival of the new 2026 regulations was no exception. In this context, Frederic Vasseur, team boss since 2023, made one of the most controversial decisions of Ferrari's modern era. In mid-April 2025, and with 3/4 of the season still remaining, Ferrari stopped development of the SF25. Planned aerodynamic upgrades were disabled, chassis upgrades were frozen, and some personnel were reassigned. Everything was aimed at a single objective, to build the perfect car for the new 2026 regulations. That play risked everything. It meant accepting a limited 2025 season with less evolution and a clear loss of competitiveness compared to rivals such as McLaren or Mercedes. But Maranello justified it with a simple logic. If the technical changes are so profound, whoever arrives first with a strong and mature concept will have an unattainable advantage. For Ferrari, 2026 was more than a regulatory change. It was a historical window to redefine oneself. These types of bets are not new in F1. Red Bull did it in 2008 before the 2009 regulations, Mercedes in 2013 with the hybrid era. Both cases ended in total domination. Vasseur sought to replicate that model. Bet everything on a new regulation in the hope of being the first to understand it. But there was a crucial difference. Red Bull and Mercedes did so from positions of technical stability. Ferrari did it from a barely contained structural instability. For years, Ferrari has dealt with internal fissures that are difficult to close. Disputes between departments, constant personnel changes, a corporate culture anchored in the fear of error rather than innovation. Betting everything on 2026 was not only a technical decision, it was also an act of faith that these structural problems would not interfere with execution, but that optimism would soon be challenged. Already in the paddock, rumors were beginning that Project 678, the internal name of the 2026 car, was developing under unusual tension. Some engineers were forcibly reassigned, others abandoned ship without much explanation. Externally, Ferrari maintained the narrative of total control. But internally, the pressure to deliver a revolutionary concept was eroding team morale. And this is where the real turning point appears, the start of development of the 2026 engine. Ferrari, historically proud of its heritage as a complete manufacturer, took on the challenge of designing an entirely new power unit under the rules of increased electrical dependence and reduced fuel flow. But doubts soon began to arise about the viability of his concept. And what began as a brave gamble on the future quickly began to look like a march straight toward the precipice. That is the context you need to understand to be able to assess what comes next. Ferrari is not just developing a car. He's fighting his own past, his inner demons, and the clock counting down to 2026, that when structure like Ferrari fully commits to a project as ambitious as its car for the new 2026 regulations, each technical decision becomes a bet with irreversible consequences. The engine, as the core of that concept, cannot fail. However, it is precisely there where the greatest source of uncertainty in Maranello is concentrated today. From the beginning of the development of the new power unit, worrying signs emerged. Rumors coming from within the factory itself, crossed with leaks from media such as Blick or Formula 1.it, began to paint an alarming picture. The Ferrari 2026 engine could be producing up to 30 horsepower, less than its equivalent under development by Mercedes. This number, in modern Formula One, is not a small gap. It is a competitive death sentence if not corrected in time. But the most worrying thing was not the deficit itself. It was the origin of that gap. The technical concept adopted by Ferrari was based on a conservative philosophy in some key points and extremely aggressive in others. And that duality turned out to be an explosive mix. The arrival of new engineers from Renault, far from strengthening the team, opened a structural crack. These new talents, upon reviewing the project, came to a devastating conclusion. The Ferrari engine was not only not innovative, but in some aspects, it was reminiscent of the project that they themselves had just canceled at Alpine due to lack of potential. This external judgment was a reality check. For the first time, critical voices did not come from the press, nor from rivals, but from within their own technical team. And this fractured unity. The old guard engineers entrenched themselves in their traditional methods. The newcomers pushed for a complete reformulation. The tension escalated quickly. What should have been a synergistic process ended in open conflict. And in Formula One, when the clock is ticking, every week of internal dispute is a lost week of development. The breaking point materialized with the departure of Wolf Zimmermann, Ferrari's engine chief, for 2026. Zimmermann was not just any engineer. He was the architect of the original concept, the driver of the most radical decisions, such as the use of steel cylinder heads designed to withstand extremely high combustion pressures. His departure, heading to Audi, was presented to the public as an orderly transition. But those who know the paddock know that it was anything but that. The truth behind his departure is even more disturbing. Zimmermann pushed Ferrari to explore uncharted technical territories with cutting-edge components that promise power, but brought with them a long list of reliability problems. The engines on the bench suffered recurrent failures. The cylinder heads did not withstand the thermal cycles. The hybrid system did not deliver the expected efficiency values. Weeks after closing the final design, Ferrari was forced to reverse its philosophy, abandoning risky solutions for more conventional ones. From steel, they went to aluminum and ceramic. From aggressiveness, they went to caution. And with this, they lost performance. This turnaround not only delayed the calendar, it also left the team rudderless. The loss of Zimmermann was a void that was impossible to fill in the short term. But even worse was the collateral damage. Trust within the team was broken. The engineers no longer worked as a cohesive unit. There was fear of proposing, fear of failing, fear of being the next to leave. And meanwhile, Mercedes and Audi continued to advance. Red Bull reorganized its priorities. McLaren refined each element with surgical precision. Ferrari, on the other hand, was fighting an internal battle that had nothing to do with its rivals. It was a conflict with his own identity. F1 doesn't wait for anyone. The clock ticks mercilessly. And the more time Ferrari wastes in philosophical debates, the further away it will be from the real starting line, the start of the 2026 season. Project 678, which was born as a promise of redemption, was beginning to take shape as a dead-end trap. A trap built by the sum of hasty decisions, competing egos, immature technology, and above all, the absence of a clear and unified vision. And that, in the Formula One of the future, will be paid dearly. At this point in the video, we are no longer talking about assumptions. Ferrari's situation has crossed the border of rumor to settle fully into the technical and political reality of the paddock. The 678 project, which should have been the promise of resurrection, is today a minefield of internal tensions, reverse decisions, and increasingly blurred objectives. But the most serious thing is not in the present, but in the implications that this failure may have for the immediate future. The development of a Formula One car under a new regulation is not simply a natural evolution. It's an arms race where every second lost in the wrong direction represents months of competitive disadvantage. And Ferrari has not only lost time, but also confidence, talent, and direction. The technical reorganization after Zimmermann's departure was more reactive than strategic. Decisions were made to put out fires, not to build a vision. The technical team was forced to simplify solutions to regain reliability, sacrificing performance. But modern Formula One does not reward reliability without speed. Ferrari's 2026 engine risks being safe, but slow and inefficient. And that is unacceptable in an era where energy efficiency and hybrid system integration will make the difference between winning and missing out on the points. Meanwhile, its rivals have refined their concepts. Mercedes has regained a stability not seen since the dominant hybrid era. Audi, from silence, has recruited top-level talent, including Zimmermann himself, to build a project with a long-term vision. McLaren, with its combination of technical aggressiveness and operational capacity, is already positioned as one of the favorites for 2026. Ferrari, on the other hand, is fighting not to self-destruct from within. And this is where the most tragic dimension of this scenario appears. Ferrari has lost control of its narrative. Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.